All right. Good morning, AP English Literature. Here we are in day 4 of distance learning, and I hope that it's meeting all of your learning needs. Yep, we got to finish up Dollhouse. I went on a kind of impressionistic rant about questions 4 through 13 last class. So I hope you were able to get some instructive insights if you hadn't already thought of that stuff to infuse into your book sum sheet, which I believe I may do Sunday. All right. Some of you guys have submitted it already. Awesome. Very impressive. You guys are ready for college. I may have you go back and look at a few things because I want to talk about some more stuff about a dollhouse. I want to continue wrapping it up, not to beat it to death, but to wrap it up satisfactorily. Again, the most important play of the 19th century in European literature, and a veritable bomb dropped on the world of theater. It was in this sort of frivolous romantic mode the theater was, and this was the bomb of realism. And again, we've linked that to literary modernism, right? This effect, this aesthetic effect on art of the Industrial Revolution, because human beings were living in a fundamentally different way, no longer in these tightly knit agricultural societies as much as before. These were urban realities and all the stuff we talked about with that. Ibsen traveled all around Europe, saw tradition eroding everywhere in the face of this avalanche, this cataclysmic socioeconomic series of convulsions caused by the Industrial Revolution, right? And so notions of self, notions of marriage, notions of acceptable living and all that stuff are being questioned. God is being questioned, you know, and this is Nora at the end. She's a mouthpiece for a lot of the questions that are arising and bubbling up beneath the veneer of tradition and so-called civilization that's kept everything in place. But again, new sorts of human beings are being created by these modern urban conditions, right? So anyway, hopefully you looked at the agenda and you looked at the do now. I wanted you to actually spend a little time on this do now. I don't expect you to turn it in, but just a few scribblings down perhaps next to these different symbols. I made a claim, it seems like so long ago in my Dollhouse lecture, that another thing Ibsen brings to the theater that is huge is visual symbolism on a level that really hadn't been seen. So I gave you guys a list of symbols just to consider. And if you just fly through these in order, you really get a nice sort of thematic summary of the flow of thought through this play. So I thought I would, if you'll indulge me, I will speak upon these points, and I'll try and keep this lecture less than 40 minutes this time. I went a little over last time. These classes are not supposed to be more than 40 minutes. All right. So again, let me just fly through these, then we'll review the homework real fast, and I will introduce another piece I want you to read that you don't have to do any work on, but read it between now and when you turn in your book summary sheet for Dollhouse. All right. Let's start with the season. I talked about this a little bit last time, but you know, it's Christmas, or it's the day before Christmas, and then Christmas, and then perhaps like the day after, right? We talked about this, trying to link it back to the seasonal stuff. I really did beat you guys over the head with, but authors use this, I mean, all the time. If they bother to refer to the season, it probably refers to some phase in a life cycle. So here we have winter, the prospect of death and dying and all that stuff. And we know that what's dying is a lot of these people's previous sense of self, that they're changing and evolving, some not by choice, that just circumstance have forced this sort of upon them. Remember, though, that as something dies, something else is reborn. As one door closes, another opens, or whatever, right? So New Year's looms on the horizon, and the possibility of rebirth, a new self, a new box, or perhaps a self free of the boxes, right? Can we conceive of such a thing? We can conceive of it. I don't think it's feasible. We live in society. We're social animals. There's the guy, hermit living on the beach in a hut or something all alone, but really we're social creatures, possessed of the idea of freedom, which is maybe a paradox, right? Anyway, literally the Christmas season is the season of giving and all this stuff, but notice it's presents and material stuff wrapped up in fancy bows and stuff like that. I mean, as Act 2 starts, you have everybody's opened the presents and there's shit all over the place. I mean, there's like wrapping paper and bows and all this stuff. And notice that the presents have been divulged. The covering is no longer on there. And you get various versions of this in terms of visual symbolism all through the play, right? So the season, obviously hugely significant. Nora's nicknames, we also talked a little bit about this. But again, look at the way you can just use the symbols as a way to fly across the top and really hit, though, the big thematic points, the nerve centers of the play. I'm going to have you guys write an essay on Dollhouse to an open question prompt, right, next week. Um, so use these symbols. I think it's an easy shorthand way to access the big ideas in this play. Nora's nicknames obviously are Little Squirrel, Songbird, who can't have a pouty squirrel. They're animals. They're birds in gilded cages because the Helmers are fairly comfortable. But again, this dehumanization and this animalization, sort of. We also link this to, and she's playing a role. All Torvald wants her to be is his little lark. And even after the shit hits the fan, he's still like, can't we just go back to you being your little lark and everybody knowing their role, right? And Nora's like, no, actually. The macaroons. If you've ever had a macaroon, not a macaron, but a macaroon, they're sickeningly sweet. I like coconut, so they're pretty good, but sickeningly sweet. And look at Nora at the beginning of the play, sickeningly sweet, because that's the infantilized female, subservient, docile stereotype that the macho man then can play the counterpart to. And this is a dialectical pair of opposites that only work when they're together, when everybody's playing their role. If anybody steps out of line, they depart from the script and the whole thing falls apart. And you guys talked about that with the 19th century letter, a husband's letter to the wife also. But so macaroons, also, she's lying. Nora's lying to Torvald about she's not supposed to eat them because they make her fat, or they, in the play, they say they rot her teeth. But this is the same polemic against women enjoying sweets or pastries, right? But sickening sweet, and then this lying that goes on. And we see the beginnings of rebellion and a little bit of again, lying to gain a little bit of space behind the facade of the gender role and all the other roles that everybody's playing, right? So at macaroons, also, Nora is infantilized by everybody. She has internalized the infantilization, and she is he running around eating sweets just like a child. We see her playing with her children as if she's one of them. And then the nursemaid comes in and, come on, kids, we got to get dressed, and all that stuff. So Nora not even really fulfilling the mother role because she is so infantilized, pretty and sweet, and it would seem dumb, right? But again, we know that women have put up the dumb facade to land a beefcake mate because men are intellectually intimidated by intelligent women. Nora's dance performances, these are almost comical. We only see it once for the end of Act 2 when Rank and Torvald take turns playing the piano and animating her, and that should tell you something also in terms of visual symbolism. But these are her playing her role. The elf maid, the Tarantella dance from Italy is this dance of seduction where you go in and out and in and out, and you're there and available, and then you're, ooh, now you're coy and whatever, right? Nora's playing this game the entire play on and off. And again, it's one exertion of power that women have historically been permitted. Sexual power in their own domain or outside the house, possibly. But again, she's playing the role solidly, and we're supposed to see it that way, right? The mailbox and the key. Remember, Krogstad's letters in the mailbox? And Torvald has the key. The truth is in there. Nora can see it through the little slot, right? It's her fate. It's her life about to blow up. It's the truth locked away, and only Torvald has the key, right? Again, key, lock, penis, right? Torvald has the penis. He has the power. We even see at a certain point, Torvald looks at himself, hey, somebody's been picking this lock with a bobby pin. So again, the hair accoutrement, the symbol of female access or something, or beauty, tries to pick the lock. She can't get in, right? Curiously enough, this mailbox and key, I think, provide a double meaning. A good symbol will change meaning sometimes over the course of a work. It is incarcerating and imprisoning initially, right? But then it's freeing. The key is the means to freedom. And this is a conversation. Freud says that all women suffer from penis envy, right? That all women want penises. The feminist movement came along and said, well, feminists don't like Freud, right? Well, I mean, we don't want your penis. It's way too much trouble. But, women do want the privileges and freedoms and rights that go with having a penis, right? So penis envy only in a figurative sense, really. But, and this is right when Freud's publishing and Ibsen is already like incorporating this stuff. And so the mailbox and the key, a symbol that accretes meaning or changes meaning over the course of the play, really deft manipulation of symbolism, no? Toward the end, after Torvald fails to be the Prince Charming on the white horse and instead is a little weenie about the whole thing, it's just like, oh my God, everyone's going to find out and all this stuff. Nora gets frozen and she goes and she's still in her costume from dancing the tarantella upstairs. And she drapes a black shawl over her costume. And then she goes into a room and takes the costume off. Torvald, what are you doing in there? Taking off my costume. And obviously, yeah, literally taking off the costume, but she's stepping outside of that performance and outside of that ridiculous, proscribed, highly constricted and oppressive female role that she has been dealt. And, again, if you choose the role, that's one thing, but if it's your only option, this restrictive role, then it can be extremely oppressive, right? So she takes off her costume right before she walks out. Appropriate, right? The costume party itself upstairs, I talked about this a little bit last time. Ibsen's vision of humanity is that we were basically like a bunch of apes who like to dress up and create personae for ourselves, to play parts, right? We're kind of deceitful, not entirely honest all the time, including with ourselves. And the costume party is the gender dance, is the construction of self party. What role are you playing? Who are you trying to be, right? Who are you really? And to what extent are you satisfying the boxes and the social roles? The dollhouse itself is a symbol, I would say. Obviously, it's the stage where all this is going on, and it's the sort of arena, the social arena of some kind. But sorry, I'm going to get visual again on you. The dollhouse is a box full of boxes. And so while you could look at this as a sort of family setting or the setting of the play, you can also look at this as kind of a construction of self. I mean, to what extent is our self the big blue square, and then is comprised of little purple squares inside, these subunits of our identity that society, again, has dealt us? Once we realize that that's the milieu we're operating around in, then there is the suggestion of freedom. But first, there needs to be that epiphany. And Torvald's weenie performance at the end creates the conditions for an epiphany. What Nora really wanted is to stay in the fantasy where he would save her and she could be the helpless little female, right? But she's already been infected with the germ of autonomy and freedom. She's worked, she's earned her own money now. You realize she's never going to be the same, but she still wanted that. That was her goal, and Torvald failed miserably. So a box full of little boxes, right? And again, what would it look like to have more agency in yourself, right? In San Francisco here, again, that's what it's been about here since the late 60s. People come here to find themselves, their true self. And does that mean anything? I don't know. Obviously, at the end, the slam door is symbolic of human freedom, of realizing the restrictive confines of the traditional gender roles and the ways that we construct ourselves and the way that we compete and exert power over each other. And this suggestion of a liberation from that, the slam door, right, at the very, very end. And again, this was a terrible bomb dropped on the world of theater. People couldn't handle the slam door, right? So brief foray through symbols, you guys. Thank you for your indulgence. I'd like you to go back and discuss symbol on your book sum sheets. Some of you guys have already submitted them, but just go back into the docs and look at the writer's style section, which is supposed to be the first category on side 2. I'd like you to discuss Ibsen's use of symbol. It's part of his style. It's what he brings to the table in theater. And again, maybe just pick 2 or 3 of these richer symbols or what you have the most to say about, and just talk about that in terms of writer's style. Okay. Thank you. I would appreciate that a lot. So in the end, revisit thematic statement 2. What fundamental dialectic or tension or contradiction does Dollhouse give us? What are your duties to yourself? What are your duties to society? Right? Maybe those are 2 separate things, but Nora says she has a sacred duty to herself as well as to her role as wife and mother. That's her particular thing, but we could easily recast this for ourselves, and I invite you to do so because that's what literature is supposed to be doing, right? What responsibility do you owe to your family, the people you know, and the people who depend on you, or the people who depend on you to behave in a certain way, actually to conform, right? And then what are you? We're not just social product, I believe. Maybe we are. Maybe we're all just completely a product of our society. We have no agency at all. There is no free will, right? But there is a suggestion in the 20th century, as tradition fell apart around us and stuff, there was this emergence of this new personal freedom. And, arguably maybe the hippies took it too far, but I mean, who's to really say? And this is what you're left with now. Every great play is not an answer. It's not trying to didactically tell you what to think. It's a series of questions and a spectrum of human experience that you can locate yourself on. And within that, have a conversation with yourself and try and be honest and shake yourself loose of these de facto thrown ways of being, as the saying goes. Okay. I asked you guys to look at that 19th century letter. Again, that'll be the last thing on grading period 5. And all due dates beyond this are flexible, but you got to get me this work by next week because I have to give grades. Actually, a week from yesterday, I have to submit grades. So get that 19th century letter work to me if you can. Again, this was the very sad story of Marcus and Ulrika, I guess is the pronunciation, but an actual letter written by a German husband telling his estranged wife who just left him, hey, you better come back here. So an almost mirror image, it's Germany as opposed to Norway, but a mirror image of what's going on in Dollhouse, right? So interesting, this is an historical document looking at the exact same situation. What world is Nora walking out into? What world did Ulrike walk out into? A very hostile world, and one which had no patience or appreciation for pursuing yourself, especially a woman, right? It's absurd. You're not going to find a job. You're not going to find another husband because they're going to think, well, what are you doing here? Or, are you damaged goods? Or, all this bullshit about purity of the wife and all that stuff, right? So Ulrika returns home and they have 8 more kids. And look at this exacting list of demands that he put on. If you're going to come back, right, this is what you're going to do. And it's this ironclad schedule. So briefly to run through these, you guys did great work on this. But number 1 asks you describe the tone of Marcus's letter to his wife. To what extent does he accept responsibility for their separation? He accepts none. He says, maybe I'm partly responsible, but remember, Eve sinned too. And so there you go. That's my proof. Eve started it. And so in the end, it's all the woman's fault, right? Where do notions of sexism and patriarchy come from? Many places, but one of them is from our religious texts, which are some of the most caustically oppressive documents ever. There's truth in there too, but anyway, I don't want to get into that right now. What significant similarities and differences do you see between Torvald and Marcus? Some of you guys had a great discussion about how actually Torvald seems to give Nora a little more freedom than Marcus gives Ulrika. And I think the audience would have seen that in Dollhouse too. They said, what is this woman's problem? I mean, I know women who have it way worse and husbands who are way more, controlling and all that stuff. So I guess it's all relative. But again, that's why this play is so effective and controversial. Oh yeah, there were some great letters that you guys wrote as Ulrika. Wish I could share them with you, but I can't. No information is available about this couple's marriage after Ulrika's returned home. What do you think it was like? I think it's safe to say that Ulrika had zero to say anymore. And if she ever gave Marcus any lip, she had to return like a beaten dog. Again, read that letter, right? It's pretty sad, but it's evocative and it's important to understand what the audience would have understood about Nora slamming that door. And that's what I really want you guys to get out of this, is the way that different historical periods read the same work of art and perhaps derive radically different conclusions. Okay, so that was that one. And I also wanted you to look at this great slam door, on the other side of the slam door in a dollhouse essay by Kathy Adner, a feminist scholar who wrote this, right? This is looking at the 19th century husband's letter to the wife as an historical document and talking specifically about Dollhouse. So let me see if I can get real fancy here and screen share. Yeah. Okay, hold on. Okay, good. There we go. Look at that. On top of the technology. Alrighty. So these were some of the quotes that you guys picked out and responded to. And I thought these were some great discussions. So there's 4 of you. I'm going to run through this real fast and just read these. This is our friend Blanca Oriana. I credited the people here. So that's the least I could do. So here's the quote. Nora slams the door on her past life, hoping to begin a new life that will be more satisfying. Yet the modern audience has no genuine sense of what she may have found beyond that door, and perhaps neither did Nora. Um, Blanca says, I think what's behind that door is hate from society, with Nora wanting to let go of all the stereotypes of being a woman. Nora wants to be different. She's going headfirst into this new world, not knowing what she's going to do. The modern audience doesn't see what's behind that door because the modern audience is living behind that door. But even in times we find ourselves stuck behind that door, stuck in these stereotypes of being a woman or even a man. I think what's behind that door is adulthood and the fact that Nora's leaving that house and slamming the door. She's done with being in that little girl state and she's ready to grow up, even though she doesn't know what society has for her. All right. I thought that was excellent. Great response to that quote, and really getting at this, the significance of that symbol of the slam door and how it's not just a symbol in a play. It's actually an articulation of something that's going on and the kind of the collective consciousness of Europe and America, let's say, because those were the industrialized countries, right? Marvelous. Thank you, Blanca, for that wonderful contribution. All right, let's move on. This was Alex, right? Here's the quote. Modern audiences tend to see Nora as a strong, admirable woman who is courageous enough to sacrifice everything in order to fulfill her own needs as an individual and as a woman. She shatters gender stereotypes through her defiant disregard for all the society demands of her. Yet, taken in the context of 19th century life, perhaps Nora's story is more tragic than we might initially like to believe. I love this. Again, Nora's leaving. Is it a triumph or is it a failure? Yes, it's both, right? Is the mailbox key a symbol of oppression and incarceration or of liberation? Yes, right? It's the same doubleness. Life is complicated, right? And so is this play. It's just 40 pages of perfectly surgically written brilliance. All right. Anyway, sorry, this is what Alex has to say. This statement brings up the tremendous changes that had happened in the last few centuries. When Ibsen wrote his play a little less than 150 years ago, people were against the idea of radical feminism. In fact, there was no such thing as radical feminism, right? Feminism had only really just begun in the form of the women's suffrage movement in let's say, the 1880s to 1890s, mainly in Britain, but also in the United States, right? Anyway, sorry. People no longer question women for breaking up with their husbands because it happens almost too often nowadays. Most readers today support Nora and Ulrike's decisions to leave, whereas people in the past were angered by it. Putting this rapid change into perspective, humanity has been around for hundreds of thousands of years, yet it was around the previous century, last 100 years, that we start to have women's rights, in addition to LGBTQT and racial equality. Current modern society changes fast, and the responses to Ibsen's A Dollhouse proves it, right? Yes. Did patriarchy always exist? No. We know that human societies were matriarchal beginning, really before agriculture, right? When did this primordial overthrow of the matrilineal or matriarchal society happen? When did the men overthrow the women? It didn't happen all at once, but many people suggest farming, when farming happened. Maybe the physical labor requirements. I don't know. It's lost in the mist of history, but that's an interesting question. When did the primordial matriarchy get overthrown and we begin to have this patriarchal structure, which pervades everywhere in the world, right? Even including the little bubble known as the Bay Area. Anyway, thank you so much, Alex. That was a super awesome remark. This, I believe, is the work of Miss Chu. Here's the quote. If Nora and Ulrike relinquish the role of the subservient and helpless wife, then Torvald and Marcus can no longer play the role of the dominating, protective husband. Without this role, the men are as helpless as they want their wives to be, and the traditional gender expectations are no longer beyond question. That's pretty good stuff, as is what Jessica said. The way Nora left Torvald also left him helpless. Without his wife to allow him to portray his predestined role of the dominant husband, Torvald's reputation's tarnished. Marcus' letter to Ulrike was not only one out of anger, it was a plea for her to come home to allow life to resume to the way he had previously known. As long as everyone is in their little box, their lifestyle and the whole structure of society is not threatened. However, if one person steps out of life, or line, societal peace is destroyed. The husband does not really have control over his wife. She could easily destroy him, emasculate him. The way a man has power over a woman and the role a woman has in the household are both social constructs. Without either party, the other is left completely helpless. And I thought this was a really good articulation of that dualistic nature of these gender roles, that one depends on the other. Everybody has to play it. And again, even a good friendship, I think, is one in which the power dynamics are just well understood and everybody, to some extent, conforms. good friendships, you're going to push each other. And maybe Mrs. Lynn tried to push Nora out of that box a little bit. This friendship is weird, you know. Why is Dr. Rank kept around? Torvald says, oh, poor Rank. He was like a cloudy, rainy background to our sunshiny life. You know, and do we select friends that way sometimes, you know? People we can hang out and look better somehow and feel better about ourselves, or I don't know, maybe when we go to the club, you know, we choose a couple of our less attractive friends. I don't know, man. People are funny like that. But thank you, Jessica, for that. It's awesome. And then let's just do one more. The quote is, his letter, while on one level an angry condemnation of his wife's stubbornness and a cruelly condescending list of conditions to be met on her return, is on another level a plea for her to accept again the role that society has assigned her. All right. And this is Annika. Although these two interpretations of the letter's intention are different in the sense that one is angry and demanding and the other is pleading, both interpretations basically describe the letter's main intention as the husband's want for his wife to be subservient and fulfill her societal role. The husband may be pleading for his wife to accept a role, but the main reason is likely not that he cares about her, but that he wants to control her. If he had really cared about his wife, then he would want to make her happy, which he could do by accepting her back without a list of conditions. The husband wants his wife back in a submissive societal role so that he remains powerful. Yeah, and again, this vision of women as an adjunct of the man, or like another object that they use to display status or exert social position or prove visually somehow their social position, right? So brilliant. Thank you, guys. Let's see if I can even get out of this screen. No way. All right, dude, I'm off and running. Okay, that's all. Well, why don't we stop there? Let's make the thing due, the book sum sheet due on Sunday. And again, please go back and add some stuff to the writer style section. If you already, you don't have to resubmit it. Again, just go back into the doc and make those changes. You know how it is. Drive changes, saves it, and then I can start looking at them really next week. I'm not going to look at any of them until I've had given you guys a chance to go back and tweak this just a little bit. I'm also going to be looking closely at the thematic statement, right? And again, duties to self versus duties to society. I really like that. That's a great general thematic construct to look at modernism in general. Okay. I've added an attachment to this document down at the bottom, the email that you clicked to get this to this video. Is Dollhouse a feminist text? By Joan Templeton, another feminist scholar. And it asked the eternal question, you know, is a Dollhouse a feminist text? Was that its intention? And of course, I told you guys before, I think, you know, Ibsen said no. And this piece is good. I just want you to read it. You don't have to do the questions or anything, but Ibsen gets invited to this women's conference, women's suffrage conference, as their hero. This is the beginnings of modern feminism. And Ibsen has been chosen to be their, like, you know, blazoning beacon, right? And he gets up there, and the first thing he says is, I'm flattered, but, you know, basically, no, this is not a feminist text. It's about human liberation, and the main character happens to be female, right? So I think that's just a really interesting angle to go. And it's something else I want to show you guys about literature, which Dollhouse is one of the best examples of this, which is the different uses and the different things that people see in it. And it's, again, shifting significance, right? So read that, Is Dollhouse a Feminist Text, before you ultimately submit for the last time your book sum sheet, and do go back and add a little bit of symbol discussion into the writer's style section. Okay, I'll check in with you guys on Monday, and I think I will just download a essay prompt. That'll be the last thing we do for Dollhouse, and then we'll start turning our attentions to preparing for the AP exam. I'm assuming you guys are getting some emails from the AP Central people. There are more lessons and practice prompts than you will be able to do between now and May 13th. So you guys should avail yourselves of those if you want to. I'm going to give you materials, not more than an hour a week, because that's our goal here for distance learning. But if you want to go above and beyond, please do. And it sounds like you guys are largely responsible for getting access to the tests yourselves. But let me know if you need any help or have any questions or anything. I'm getting those emails too. But I hope that they're emailing you, because they're claiming that they are. And again, it's rather stunning how much they have available for you guys, including if you're getting sick of these taped things from me, they've got online lessons by some of the big luminaries of the entire AP committee movement, lecturing on literature and such like things. So happy distance learning day 4. Hope everything's going well with you guys. I didn't hear from anybody yesterday during office hours, which is fine. I have stuff to do. But anyway, don't bother to call me if you need me or anything. And in the meantime, do some last little burst of thinking on Dollhouse here and the ramifications. And I'll see you guys on the other side. Take care.